Colleen and Bradley show here on myTalk 1071. We're streaming live and doing everything entertainment at mytalk1071.com. Colleen Lindstrom, I'm Bradley Trainer, and Elizabeth Ries stuck around with us to talk all things Making a Murderer.
Happy to hang with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for sticking around.
And you were there, Elizabeth, so we opened up our email lines. That doesn't make any sense. But,
there's a lot of those lines.
but our listeners sent us questions for you because they just want to know what it was like to be there during the filming of this now sort of, I guess you could call it a phenomenon, series on Netflix.
It absolutely is.
Making a Murderer.
I cannot believe the amount of reaction to this.
And I'm sure for people like us here locally, you know, there is sort of an affinity for things nearby. And so a lot of people that live here, like yourself, were either there, have family there. We talked to a guy, a listener of ours, who actually went to see the Packers game over the weekend.
Yeah,
I don't know when
it was on the weekend.
Games. And he made a side trip to the Avery salvage yard and talked to the brother of Stephen Avery.
Look at that.
Isn't that crazy?
Drive on up. Avery Road. It's right there.
Probably something I wouldn't have the cojones to do.
No.
Yeah, he should be a reporter.
But indeed. Now, we got one question from Phil, and I think this is actually, isn't this Phil from the guy who went to the Avery salvage yard? He says, ask Elizabeth if the station still has file footage of the ex-boyfriend Ryan. He has blatant scratches on both hands. Also, the RAV4 had a broken headlight, missing wheel well cover, and dent under the front like it had been towed. Wow, he's got some specifics.
Yeah, the station's going to have the footage.
Well,
absolutely.
and that's and actually that actually opens up to my question, which is during the trial, I mean, as you guys are all sitting, as you've mentioned before, there was like a bureau set up in the basement of the courthouse.
Yeah.
So you guys are all kicking it down there while the trial is going on. And you're paying attention to it, and of course you're working, and you're trying to put your packages together and figure out exactly what angle you're going to report on. But in the midst of all of that, as you all are mixing up, do you have theories? Are you thinking about who might have done it? Were there theories at the time floating around about, if not Stephen Avery, then whom?
Yeah, there were lots of questions about that. I mean, the ex-boyfriend, Ryan, was a thought. I mean, of course, people think about the family members because that's what you think about in these types of cases, who's closest to her. There were thoughts, theories about maybe other Avery family members besides Stephen Avery who might have been involved. So there were all sorts of theories being kicked around, and there were also lots of reactions. So when there'd be in any court case, there are times when the testimony is kind of dry, and there are times when you're like, oh man, what point are we getting to here? And then it's boom, then we make a point. Or, and a lot of the stories that we did centered on, here was the new evidence that came out today. Here is the new point. Here's the new piece of the puzzle. Here's what the prosecution or the defense is trying to get the jury to believe. And that was the center of the reporting on a daily basis.
How long did the story sort of sit around in the ether after the final verdict? Because I guess the last verdict would have been Brendan Dassey's case, and barring any appeals and that part of the process for Stephen Avery or anyone else. That after that initial trials happen and they go away, how long is the community still talking about it? I mean, I feel like it probably was always lingering out there to some degree, but...
I mean, I wasn't there for that much longer after that, and then I moved to the Twin Cities, but it has always been something that they've talked about. I mean, Stephen Avery is a name that everybody knows in that area. Brendan Dassey is a name that everybody knows in that area. I mean, I would argue that it was the biggest case since Jeffrey Dahmer that people were talking about, that people knew about. And so it's something that, people, I think, have continued to talk about. I did send a Facebook message to a woman who is she's a reporter at my former station, and she was there. I was with her every day during the trial, and she continues to work there. And I said, are you getting 1,000 messages a day? And she said, not 1,000, but this is what everybody is talking about. And her name is Emily Matestic, and she's in the documentary quite a few times too. You see her. So for me too, it's kind of a walk down memory lane because I see all these different people, all these different, photographers and journalists and everybody who I worked with.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's, and where are they now? And what are they doing? And
So you almost want to have like a happy hour.
I know. Like, do we need to rehash this? Yeah.
Okay, speaking of rehashing something, there's a very specific moment that I've been dying to ask you about.
Okay, gosh, I hope I know.
I think that you'll remember this moment. So, and I wanted to get this out before we lose you today. So, as we've talked about, there's 2 trials happening, the Stephen Avery trial, and then the last one that we hear about in Making a Murderer is the Brendan Dassey trial. That is the nephew of Stephen Avery, who was an accomplice or also allegedly part of this.
Yeah, and
experience.
convicted. Yeah.
And convicted, yeah. So now you, and I pointed this out to you and you did not recall this, were sitting behind his parents, Brendan Dassey's parents, when his verdict came down.
Boy, I must be like blacked out.
Okay, well,
to remember that.
Let's see if it comes back after I tell you this. Do you recall, because this also is featured in Making a Murderer, she, the mother, her reaction to his, the verdict, she left the courtroom in a full-blown swearing, tantrum rage. And you are in that scene. Do you remember standing outside in the dark with the cameras while she was having this meltdown? Do you recall that at all?
I mean, I'm going to have to see it to remember it. I remember the extreme reaction, but standing outside and waiting for that, I don't remember.
It's wild because as a parent, that's the part that I connect to of that story, and especially because Brendan Dassey in life is he's somewhat he's got some mental limitations, and it's very obvious. And I had asked you even off the air if they really talked about that a lot in the trial.
I wanted to know about that, like just on like if you just know from your experience in the case, did they never have to give him like an IQ test to see if he was?
I found this out today.
Okay,
I learned about this.
Oh, tell.
Apparently, 69 is like the threshold of low functioning.
And he's at a 70.
Yeah. And so that was actually entered into testimony.
And was there ever any question about whether he would be tried as an adult or a child?
Yeah, there was question about that. There was a hearing to decide if that would happen, and then it was decided. Because when you're 14, you can be tried as an adult in cases where it's an adult crime. So there are certain crimes that you can be accused of, murder being, of course, the most heinous of crimes.
Yeah.
And then in that case, at 14, you can be tried as an adult, and that's what decision has to be made by a judge. So there was a hearing based on that.
I think we should probably save the most critical and important question for last for Elizabeth, who's joining us. Elizabeth Ries was there for Making of a Murderer, and we've been talking about it obsessively ever since Netflix let it out and we watched it. Kim has a very important question for you, Elizabeth. Ask Elizabeth if she still knows the hot Silver Fox news reporter Aaron Keller.
Oh, yeah.
Seen in Making of a Murderer. Can I get his phone number? And I will say he was probably the most attractive person in the series, because there weren't a lot of attractive people.
Aaron Keller worked at the NBC affiliate in town, so NBC 26, and he is a nice guy, and I don't know whether he is single and ready to mingle. I should look him up on Facebook. I think I'm probably still friends with him on Facebook.
Okay, we're working on a match.
And I'm sure
Making a match.
Find it.
Well, she knows his name. She's clearly done her homework.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's there are some handsome television reporters.
Were there, okay, so can you dish a little bit? Like, so you're there with everybody, so your competition, right?
Yeah.
Are you far enough away from that experience? Like, were there people that you would see walk through the door and you're like, oh, God, so-and-so's here, like, that person? Because I would imagine that a case like this brings out people who are trying to grandstand for their own personal gain.
Yeah.
Whether it's news or, the judicial system. I imagine those personalities have a way of, like the prosecutor.
Well, there were bigger, more national publications and television stations that would send in people, but not for the entire time. And so I think for those of us who were like in the trenches every single day, when somebody would roll in from, whatever, bigwig television network or something, we'd be like, okay, geez, we're the ones who
We've been here.
We've been here the whole time, day in, day out, and so that was. There was definitely competition. The interesting thing is, it's a fascinating study, and in so many different people watching the same thing, but hours and hours of testimony, and what tidbits do they pull out? What do you pull out? And so, as a reporter, it's such great training because you can really directly learn from other people, and you see are their stories different than mine?
Yeah.
What's going on? What am I pulling out as the most important thing? And it was a lot of pressure. I mean, I'll tell you, it was a lot of pressure.
You said you got shingles.
I broke out in shingles at the end of it. Yeah, at the end of Stephen Avery's trial, I broke out in shingles. Emily Matesic, that reporter, she saw a rash on my neck, and she was like, "You have something on your neck." And I went to urgent care right away. I had shingles. It was terrible. I mean, that feeling of responsibility of wanting to do the job and the emotional turmoil of these families was difficult. Seeing her brothers was almost too much for me to bear.
Yeah.
I mean, watching her brothers listen in court to what prosecutors said that Brendan Dassey and Stephen Avery did to their beloved sister in the last moments of her life was, I will never forget.
It'll stay with you
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
Well, I know that your plan is to watch the whole thing this weekend. I
I'm
hope
gonna
you
do
don't
it.
break out in shingles
I
after
know,
that.
that's what I'm getting I'm getting stressed right now talking
Go
about
get your
that.
vaccination.
I will.
You should be okay.
Yeah, go to the Walgreens, get your vaccination.
If I need to go
get
to
some
urgent care,
popcorn.
I'm going to call you guys
Yes.
because you made me do it.
We'll take it on.
Well, if you have any thoughts and opinions, and I'm sure you will after you do, if you do indeed get to it this weekend, let us know because we'd love to have you back.
I will. Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me, you guys. And the bottom line is, boy, I mean, what a beautiful country we have to be able to question the justice system and question these things. It's so important. It's so important because it's all about people's lives. So thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Ries, of course, you go see her